Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan. I had the privilege of speaking to the new world champion, Nathan Steuer. He generously gave me the time to talk about his world championship experience, the mental part of Magic, his testing process, and climbing through the ranks of the Magic scene, playing in more and more important tournaments. This was an awesome time, and I thank Nathan for giving me that time. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Here it is. Well, first off, thank you so much for saying yes to this interview. It really means a lot. I kind of just like sent a message and shot my shot, and it's like really cool that you agreed. So thank you first off. It's really awesome. Um, so I guess we can ask some questions, chat for a little bit, and that'd be kind of a cool thing. So first off, so how did you start playing Magic? Let's start at square one.
Yeah, so I first started playing at summer camp. I think I was about 8 or 9, and I played during the release of Zendikar was the first set that I remember doing.
Okay.
And I think at that point I vaguely knew what the cards did, but I did not know how to build decks. I didn't really know how to do any of the typical things you did at Magic, and instead I enjoyed just playing with my friends, and it was a fun thing to do when all my friends wanted to just play at summer camp, and it was like the new Pokemon.
That's super cool. I miss those days. I don't know about you. um, so when did you? So like you start playing at summer camp? That's awesome. When did you realize like this game's awesome? Like you loved it.
So I think the first time was when I went to draft. I went to a Friday Night Magic, and my mom drove me and a group of four other friends from summer camp to one of the Friday Night Magic things, and the owner of the store was really gracious and was like, "Okay, here are 3 packs. It's pretty simple. Just take your favorite card from each pack, and at the end of it, you're going to add lands to that, and that's going to be your deck." And so we didn't really know what that meant, but I think getting to experience that moment was like the first of like, okay, this is really cool. And when I got some wins and was like, okay, like I sort of know what I'm doing, I was like, this is great. And then I found out that you can do actual tournaments. And once I found out that was a thing, I was like, okay, I want to compete at this. I know I'm just a competitive person. I hate losing, but even more than how much I hate losing, I really like winning. So I wanted to try to see how far I could get at that. And that stuck.
That's super cool. The local level, it's really cool how like you hear about all of these like big name Magic players like yourself, that started with just like a really cool store owner or a really cool local Magic player that was there. That's really awesome. Plus that competitive spirit is really cool. Um, when did you realize you were like good at this?
So it's a hard question because there were definitely times where I thought I was good at it. And then there were times that I thought, wow, I really wasn't good at it, but now I think I'm good at it.
Yeah.
And that sort of feeling is kind of what keeps Magic fresh, where there's a lot of opportunities for that to continuously happen. And then you get good at it and you're like, wow, I'm really not that good at it. There's a lot of opportunities to be much, much better at it. So I think that experience kind of was reoccurring as I moved up stages on the grindy ladder system
Mhm.
of tournament play. I
Do you feel good at it now?
think
I
so.
think
I
so.
think I've gotten to a point where I think I'd consider myself pretty good.
Heck yeah, awesome. No, I totally get that feeling. You have like one round where you feel like you're the best in the world, and then like 3 rounds later, you're just like, wow, what am I doing here? Why am I?
Yeah.
I totally understand that. Um, who do you look up to? Either win
Good
or
question.
within or without Magic. Whichever.
Within Magic, I really respect um like particular players. I would say my group of friends and testing teammates has been like the biggest influence on me. Um originally some of my closer friends, my friend Lee and Mike were two of my close local friends who really
Mhm.
like adopted me as like basically their magic child who they took to events and kind of fostered a community with and helped to get me inspired to want to compete. And then closer when it comes to like competitive influences, um, my buddy Sam Rolfe and I began during COVID working together,
Awesome.
and I think we had very opposite skill sets in terms of Magic that allowed us to one kind of disagree a lot and make a lot of progress when we disagreed about what was the right play and how to think about games, and then two, not beyond just debating, we really tried to push each other's weaknesses and turn them into more strengths that we can just consider benefiting from. Because a lot of Magic is, for me at least, about trying to find common ground. And then there's some times where you're playing with a player and you're like, wow, like I know this player is very good and they consistently do super well and I've watched them play, but I just would never think about this turn or this play the same way over a course of a game. And so when those moments happen with people who you really respect in Magic, like my buddy Sam and a few other examples I would have, it's really good to be able to check your knowledge and try to improve that way because it's just so recurring. There's so many decisions in Magic, and so for me, that disagreement is refreshing and really helped me level up.
It's an awesome attitude. 'Cause, like, so many Magic players take that disagreement as like an insult. So that attitude of like, using it as a room for growth is really cool. It's probably why you're where you are where you're at. You mentioned that you had a certain skill set, that you brought to your testing. What would you say that your like your skill set is or your specialty is, that you mentioned?
Yeah, so I could go into technical play and how that benefits, but I think in terms of prepping for tournaments and work, a lot of my skills come with the ability to tune decks and strategies. I think when I watch a game of Magic, I can extrapolate with a pretty low sample size relative to what you typically need to draw conclusions.
Hmm.
And so what that means is if I watch a match, I would say within even 1 to 3 matches, I could identify a card that will be weak in the next 8 or 10. Um,
Cool.
and it's easy to make those claims and be confident in them. It's a lot harder to consistently be right about them. I think I've developed some good strategies to knowing when a card is weak, and so yeah, tuning decks and that process is probably a strength that I've developed. And then deck selection, which is just the ability to understand how decks play against one another and figure out which decks are more exploitable than others and how to do so with specific card choices is something that I spent a lot of time on because I believe that one of the biggest strengths in competitive Magic is having very good deck selection and having good plans.
Yeah.
So I would say, yeah, the other skill similar to that is coming up with good plans for matchups, meaning like how is the game going to play when you play a certain card in the matchup that's important, and how are you going to develop a way of turning that into a win? And so yeah, I think my ability to plan in Magic is pretty good and something that I've improved on a lot in the past year or so.
I think that's awesome. Like that actually, hints at one of my future questions. So I was racking my brain from watching Worlds coverage, and at one point you cited out Shieldred in a matchup that like my brain went like, whoa, that like, that feels like Shieldred is really good in that matchup. But I think it makes sense. I think I saw on Twitter the other day, you explaining that decision, having to do with trying to make the removal poor or something to that effect, and that and what you just said, your strengths really, that explains a lot, that you feel like that's one of your strengths because that makes sense to me, now that it's explained. um, okay, so let's see. Has life changed at all now that you're world champion? I mean, it's been a few weeks at this point.
I think it's sunk in a little more for me. One thing that's notably changed is one of my favorite things to do outside of competing in Magic is coaching in Magic and instructing others.
Mm,
And it's given me the ability to have a little bit more credentials and also to demonstrate how I use my planning to succeed in tournaments. I think for me, um, it's kind of hard to know how much weight to put into results in Magic. And so winning the world championship for me was partly just like a wow, like you achieved this thing and it's not just through like pure luck, like that'll only get you so far. And so I think my perspective on what it takes to compete in games, but also how you have to think to solve problems has evolved. And
Mhm.
I'm very proud of the amount of effort I put into it, and I feel like this is the type of process that I'll try to replicate for other hobbies or even just work and jobs in the future.
That's exciting. Really cool. Um, so so you're already very young, especially to achieve like the pinnacle of all of this, and you've been playing Magic competitively for a very long time. There's even that if you like Google your name, there's pictures of you when you were like a literal child, at like Grand Prix and stuff, which
Yeah.
is really funny, really cool. Um, you know, but like, how has your like perspective and goals changed as the years have gone by? You say you mention it, it's like, oh, I like winning, losing sucks, or whatever. But like, what, like, obviously, like, you have grown dramatically as a person from that child, playing at the Grand Prix to this, I thinking critically about the decks and the prep and putting in the work you had to do to become the two-time Mox champion and then the world champion. So how's that perspective and goals changed?
I think I spent a lot of my time when I was younger trying to prove to others that I could I could do a certain thing, and that the method of doing that was kind of similar to a lot of other Magic players, where I spent a lot of effort trying to complain about how when things went wrong, it wasn't necessarily my fault, and also I think a lot of my energy was in the wrong place. I wasn't so much focused on how I could cultivate like a better scene to work with over time in terms of I didn't have a long-term prospect with
Mhm.
Magic. And so now that I've seen and been in the inner workings of Magic testing teams and worked with a lot of very smart and caring people, I recognize that there's a lot of value in trying to show others how to not only like improve at Magic, but also how to be a strategic thinker in other aspects of your
Mhm.
life. And so something that I would say is the most significant with that is like helping people with like their own mental struggles, similar to what I had to endure, has been like a really fulfilling part of coaching and also just a shift from when I was younger that I don't think I fully recognized.
By mental struggles mean like mental health regarding Magic and competing.
Right, and
Yeah,
just the amount of pressure you put on yourself to succeed because ultimately you're going to have weekends, I mean, where you just do badly in Magic and you're not going to have the ability to, continue on and keep a good mindset about it if every single punch gets you down to the floor.
totally. It makes sense, and I think we all know people that like are really, really hard on themselves. This game's really tough. What's your prep or testing process like? I mean, you don't have to give me like all the secrets or anything, but just in general. Or are there like any rituals you do before an important Magic Online tournament? Or, I mean, I guess you're beyond the PPTQ or RCQ system at this point. But versus like a Pro Tour or Worlds, any prep or testing or any rituals you do?
Yeah, so starting with testing teams, the prep process, it's not too much of a secret. I think it could be pretty replicable. It
Mm-hmm.
just really depends on the members of your group and how cohesive they can become. Um, but it usually starts with spending a lot of effort organizing. So I think Discord's a really good medium for this, just making like a ton of Discord channels. And the normal process is first like defining what we know about different decks in a format. And so we have a channel for each deck that we think is competitive or could be playable. We list brews, and this is kind of earlier in the format before things are fully developed. And then it kind of gradually shifts to meetings where we discuss essentially like what we've learned from playtest games. Usually we have a set of 1v1 games going throughout the day whenever people are online. So different channels where people can check in and be like, okay, now it works for me. Let's play some games. And then the other half of it is really developing strong theory with the games that you've played. So I kind of referenced this earlier, but a lot of my testing involves extrapolating information from what other people have said and trying to translate that into um, new cards you play, a new understanding of how decks line up against each other, or just new questions to ask. It's really just like a series of questions that you go down when you're testing.
Hmm.
And even by the end of the process testing worlds, I think there was more questions than we had started with that we hadn't answered. But that type of process is, I would say, would leads to a lot of people succeeding. It's when you get into a state where you're not exactly sure what the ideal scenario is for your deck and your choice, but you know that you've gotten a lot further with processing. And yeah, I feel like I've just spent a lot of time developing these ideas with strong teammates. Yeah.
It's really cool. Yeah. That's also like a little eye opening for, I mean, I think, the culture that I'm a part of is just the grinder culture, where you just like, you bring the deck you've been playing with, or you bring the deck you think is good, and you just go to a tournament, totally preparing for tournaments with people. I think is really, is very different than I think the average like grinder, I guess you would say, does. And it makes sense why the same people do well so often. Um, so to return to, World specifically. So you were very emotional after your last round of Swiss, lost to Ely Cassis. By the way, kind of rude that they kept the cameras on you. That was a little weird. That was a thought that I had watching
Yeah,
it.
no
But
kidding.
yeah, right. What was going through your mind?
So after the match, I realized I was kind of in a bit of shock
Hmm.
that there was a camera zooming into my face. I just lost probably the most heartbreaking match in my life and was
Totally.
feeling kind of down. And I think a part of me felt like this is the only chance I was going to get. I knew there was a backdoor chance that I snuck in, but realistically, I was like, this
Hmm.
is my opportunity. I need to win. This is it. And it's a lot like when you sink hundreds of hours into testing for a singular tournament and then you finish and in the last round I think I was feeling like wow I lost my opportunity. It wasn't shown on camera and I'd probably
Mm.
mention it now, but the first game of our set was really intense. I actually almost roped out in a situation where I had 12 Mayhem Devil triggers, and I
Oh
was
my god.
playing versus Spirits deck,
Yeah.
and it turned out I needed 13 in order to kill his board and not die. So it was just this really crazy situation where I was one ping short of killing his creature, and I was like,
Wow.
wow, like this turns impossible. I just can't imagine like if maybe if I were a better player, I could have succeeded in this situation, but having that game into a really tough finish to that match left me like,
I,
oh my gosh, like he's already in top four and I'm out now. I'm done.
right. You felt it, watching, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I just thought of this question, but you're obviously like a very Magic Online focus. At least a lot of your success has been on Magic Online.
Hmm.
Is playing on Arena, especially you mentioned the rope thing, and I know this is one of my issues as well. Is playing on Arena like fundamentally different than Magic Online for you?
Yeah, it's a lot harder for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I played so much Magic Online in the past 2 years that I'm used to um, getting to focus really hard on the hard turns,
Hmm.
and I'll spend 5 minutes, 6 minutes on one turn thinking and optimizing a line because one skill that I developed is like understanding when a turn is like the most important and the most fundamental in a game, and then when you get to that point and you're on arena and you quickly went through your first 4 or 5 easier decisions, it's like, well, I don't know what to do. I'm like panicking. I see the rope, and I'm sure a lot of players do this, but I start to panic.
Oh, that's why I asked that question. I'm glad there's somebody
Yeah,
else like me. I'm also a Magic Online oriented person, and I do the exact same thing. You take 6 minutes on a turn. That's what you're used to, and then you play Arena and just, oh well, do the turn you see,
yeah,
or it's awesome. Uh,
yeah.
so
And if
weird.
I hadn't tested a lot for Worlds on Arena, I don't think I would have gotten that down because before Worlds, truthfully, I still had not roped it in. Like for the first three championships of the year, like earlier that qualified for Worlds, I don't think my time management on Arena was a big skill
Mhm.
of mine.
Yeah, it's a different game. It really is. Um, what can the average person do to level up their game?
Good question.
It's okay if it's
No, I have answers. I'm trying
okay.
to think of what the best thing to do is.
Okay.
I think what I would recommend is, I mean, one, try to find better players to play with, and that's how I've improved every single time I've gotten better at Magic. I've kind of leveled up, and sometimes that means leaving previous testing partners who don't want to get better by the wayside in some ways, but finding better players to play with has been a really big part of me getting better at Magic. And then the other is figuring out how to learn from your losses. So once
Mhm.
I got to a point in Magic, probably in the past 3 to 6 months, that I could finish a game and understand like what decisions maybe affected the outcome most significantly. I had a lot more clarity, and so what I would recommend is don't feel bad about going back and just studying your wins and your losses for the important decisions on both sides, because once you can learn to see a game and recognize right where it fell apart. Sometimes you can learn to catch that beforehand, and that's where you really seem to succeed. For me, once I noticed that I was about to make a mistake and caught it beforehand, that kind of scaled out. And
Mhm.
the more games I played, the more moments that happened, and suddenly you're making less and less mistakes.
Are you referring to like watching replays on Magic Online or?
Big part of it.
Yeah.
Even in paper when I play,
Hmm.
I'll pull back up the situation. I mean, not everyone has the ability to go back to a board state and
Right.
remember it exactly, but for me, just from studying the games that I played, I think you build up really strong intuition with that.
That makes sense. Makes sense to me. Cool. So we're kind of winding down here. I really appreciate you giving me your time. So most important question: what's your favorite ice cream flavor?
I really like green tea ice cream. Green tea ice cream is one of my favorite flavors. I
I've
also am a fan of cookie dough. Those
uh,
those two.
classic cookie dough. I've never had green tea. I'll definitely have to try that.
Like
uh,
like matcha green tea. So I don't know if I
matcha.
ever had it.
Okay, matcha. Yeah, okay. I've had matcha. That's cool. Um,
Yeah.
cool. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me. So where can people find you online? Is there anything you'd like to promote before we sign off or anything like that? Before this interview, you mentioned coaching sessions. Is there anything, if this video ends up being reasonably popular, is there anything that you'd like people to know about?
Yeah. So you can find me on Metafy.com/Nathan Steuer1. And I also have a Twitter with the same tag, Nathan Steuer1. Um, Feel free to message me on Twitter. I'm happy to engage and talk about Magic, and reach out to me.
Absolutely. And that's how this interview happened, by the way, which is
Yeah.
really, really cool of you, to do. I'll put links to all that stuff in the description as well so people can find you. That's awesome. Nathan, I really appreciate you taking the time. It really means a lot, as a mid-level grinder that wants to be in your shoes one day. It's really humbling and awesome to listen to your thoughts. So I appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
All right. We'll see you later. Thank you. Bye.
All right, bye.
I hope you all enjoyed the interview with Nathan Steuer, the world champion. If you did, you should like and subscribe for other content like this. In the future, when I do interviews, if there's any other things you would like to know about about the people, I guess, please put it in the comments. I would really appreciate it. Check me out on other social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Links to Nathan's stuff is also in the description as well. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.